In this video, I want to talk to you about how you can lose little to no money when buying and selling bass guitars. Hey guys, thank you for tuning into the channel once again. If you're new around here, don't forget to hit the like button and to hit that subscribe button too, and to keep up to date with the latest notifications on this channel, and when I go live, hit that notification bell as well. So in this video, I want to talk to you about the economic considerations when buying a bass guitar. I want to give you my tips and tricks on how you can lose little to zero money when buying basses and selling basses. And I also want to talk to you about the pros and cons of upgrading basses and buying and selling those secondhand. A lot of you guys that watch my channel talk about buying a Squier and then upgrading parts on it, and that's kind of what inspired me to do this video. A lot of you talk about upgrades and tweaking parts of a bass, and so I wanted to kind of run through them systematically, run through the different costs and prices, and how I think you can best save your money and retain value in the instruments that you are buying. For this video, I've gone for 3 different Fender precision style basses, and I've stuck to Fenders because Fenders typically have a resale value that is pretty easy to judge, and they all roughly go for the same amount of money depending on the model that you are buying or selling. So for the Squier, I've chosen the CV60s precision bass because firstly I really like it. I think it's a great quality precision bass for a good price. Secondly, I've gone for the Player series made in Mexico bass because I think that's pretty much kind of close to the CV60s. It's that typical standard precision bass. And then I've gone for the American Pro 1, so the original Pro series, primarily because there are more of those being bought and sold online because they're an older bass, and the Pro 2 came out during the pandemic, so it's difficult to really put a gauge and have a gauge on those and their prices and fluctuations. But I think all of those are pretty much a standard P bass. What I'm going to do in this video is run through buying one of those new and buying one of those second hand in each of those categories. I'm going to go through the different parts you might want to add or tweak on those basses to get them to equivalent level in terms of the quality of those parts. And then I want to run through the financial elements of those and kind of do a little bit of a spreadsheet affair and show you what I think it would cost to do those upgrades and how much money you are losing on each of those basses. So I'm going to start off with the CV60s precision bass. As you can see here up on the screen, I've got the prices for different parts. I'm running through the different parts that I've kind of spec'd these imaginary basses out with, and then talk about the value for money of each of those upgrades. And yeah, we'll just run through it, and hopefully I'll give you my conclusions and the tips and tricks come the end of the video. So if you have got your opinions on this, don't forget to leave those in the comments below. So let's go, here we go. I've got the Squier CV60s lined up, and I'm here on the Guitar Center Langley website from, which you'll know from a lot of my reviews if you watched this channel before. If not, head over to the channel and check out some of the reviews on a lot of these basses that I've done. So this is the Squier Classic Vibe 60s at £349. So as you can see, that's the initial price there that I've listed. Tuners are one of the things that I think always needs upgrading on a Squier because they're just a little bit on the cheap side. And I have gone for, wrong things, the Schaller bass tuners here for £62. All of these are roughly, rough equivalents. You can definitely spend more or spend less, but I think this is what it kind of required to get it to a very solid gigging standard that you could use for years to come. So yeah, the Schaller tuners here, £62 added there. When it comes to pickups, I really like the Marzio pickups for bass. I liked the Willpower middle pickup here, as you can see. I think they might have discontinued this, but a lot of bass pickups are around the same money, £60 to £80. So I felt like 75 was pretty justified. I know a lot of you people like quarter pounders, don't really like them personally, but a lot of people do. And the EMG Geezer Butler pickup, that's popular too. But that's £75, so that's this pickup to bring it up to that kind of level. When I talk about the level, I'm trying to match what's kind of on the American Pro stock. Bridge, I don't know whether you need to upgrade that or not. Really, it depends. I think maybe we could add this Fender high mass bass bridge. I personally actually don't really see the need for a high mass bridge on a Fender style instrument. I did have a Federa which I really liked, the bridge on that, the bridge on those are beautiful, but whether that was what really contributed to the sound or every other element of the bass, hard to tell. But I've added the bridge in there at £29, just because I think it's worth considering to really match the pro level. Then wiring, I personally don't think the pots on these basses are very good, and if you're going to change that pickup, I would definitely add some wiring with some different pots on it. So $34.99 for those. I went for this model up here, which I was on a moment ago. Just typically, it's all roughly around this price, £25-35 for some high quality, different parts, Switchcraft jack, premium SSS pots, CTS pots. So just a few little bits and pieces. I think it's worth it. When you're buying a Squier, I think you've got to probably consider a setup, because the amount of time that is taken on a setup is really not very long on a Squier, and I've had them really vary. Some of them have been great, and I've also had some that have come out of the shop and had the nuts cut too deep or things needed replacing. So I think you're going to be probably paying £50 for a setup. I mean, you may be paying more if you want someone to install all these elements at some point, but £50 added to this budget, and also a gig bag for the bass, because you've got to take it around somewhere or other if you're going to go anywhere, or just to store it. So that's the cost of a new Squier CV60s. If we come down here, we can see that costs altogether £644. So you're spending more than the cost of a Player Precision just to get that new. Resale value is about $280, based on this Fender Squier Classic Vibe here. As you can see, that does have an upgraded pickup in it already. So that's one thing to mention. When you're upgrading your bass, you're not really adding any value to it second hand. People won't pay more because of the upgrades, really. You're pretty much taking all of the loss and the hit on that yourself. So overall, that's a loss of £364 if you buy the CV60s brand new and upgraded it. So then, just zooming out a little bit here, have a look at the same bass second hand. So what I haven't done is add the pickup, because obviously the bass we've got here has already got the upgraded pickup. So I haven't added the cost of that, because typically that's one of the things that people do upgrade all the time. So you can find a lot of Squiers with that upgraded pickup. Initial price $280, as you can see there. This is a bass that's already been sold on eBay, by the way, so it's a kind of typical example. Tuners are the same shallow ones, £62. Pickup not included. We'll add the bridge because, as I say, it's not common, but I don't know if you necessarily need it. Some new strings. Sorry, I didn't include the strings on the previous part, but the Squier strings aren't great. You want some new strings on it, really, particularly buying a second hand one. You're going to want some new strings. So generic strings, £20. You might want to change the wiring out. You might not, to be honest, because it's already been upgraded, and if you're not going to be taking it apart, maybe let's take that back out of it. If you want it to get up to that top level, though, you probably do want to include the wiring. Being second-hand and a Squier, it's probably quite likely that it needs a setup, because a lot of people probably haven't set it up already, or are more inexperienced players, or whatever it might be. Typically, a second-hand Squier is going to need a setup as well. So that's £50 unless you do it yourself. But I think for a lot of people buying a Squier, they're probably not going to want to do that themselves to start off with. They're going to want to feel someone that's done it professionally and they know what it feels like, and then start to aim for that kind of region in terms of tone and feel. So that's taking us to $441. That $280 resale again, pretty much get back the same money you paid for it. Maybe give or take £10 or so, or what the market's doing, but typically you can get back the money you paid for most basses. Because that was the second-hand rate. You bought it at that price, you can typically sell it at that price too. And so that's an overall loss of $161. So a lot less, £200 saving really you're making there by buying second-hand. Obviously, maybe it's not got all those elements, so if you put the pickup in, £75 additionally, put the wiring in. And I didn't include the gig bag because most people, I think, would have bought a gig bag. So second-hand, you're likely to have a gig bag. So that's taken us to £271. So pretty much you're paying the money that you paid to buy the bass to then buy the hardware. And that is what that price is. It's just the cost of the hardware to upgrade the bass. So that's still quite a lot of money overall. We're spending kind of $550, spending $644 if you're going to fully upgrade your Squire. So, you know, it's not maybe as cheap as it looks at first. A lot of players, if you're going to buy a Squire, you might want to just leave it as is, but a lot of people do want to upgrade them, and so maybe you're not necessarily saving that much money because you're spending quite a lot of money and you're not making any of that money back. So when you sell that base upgraded, it's still going to be worth $280 no matter what you've done to it. So now we're looking at the Player P base, brand new from the Guitar Center Langley website, $5.99. I reviewed this very model, currently not in stock, but that doesn't matter. In terms of tuners, I don't think the tuners really need upgrading on the Player P. They could be upgraded. There is some element to say it's worth upgrading, but I don't think in general you need to. The pickup I do think is worth upgrading, so putting that same Damasio pickup in there, put £75 additionally. The bridge maybe worth upgrading, let's put that across there, because I do think the bridge is, if we're trying to get to that equivalent to a Pro series bass, the bridge is a little bit simple compared to that, but I personally wouldn't upgrade it. I think these stock Fender bridges are fine. The custom shop behind me has got the stock Fender bent bridge, and that's a great bridge, just works. Strings, I don't think you need to necessarily upgrade straight out of the box. Wiring, I don't think you need to upgrade out of the box. Setup, possibly might not need to pay for that, because particularly if you're buying this level of bass, you might be a little bit more switched on about it. You might want to be doing it yourself. It's not hard, it's really not hard to do. And I think the time spent on it is a bit better as well. The Player Ps that I've played have been set up better than I expected them to be, and so I think you can actually get away with just playing them stock as they are. Last thing to consider with the Player brand new is possibly a gig bag. Just go for a pretty standard £25 gig bag. So that there is kind of like what I think you would possibly need. Maybe if we add the wiring in, if you want to change that, possibly. That takes us up to $312.99 as the loss. So overall expenditure is £762. The resale value of $450, which comes from this chap right here on eBay, recently sold. They're all roughly in this £400 to £500. I think $500 is pretty ambitious, given the original price of the bass. I think $450 is just about right in terms of resale, secondhand, maybe $400, but something around that ballpark is right for a secondhand Player P. And yeah, so that's the total loss of $312.99. Then moving across to the Player Bass secondhand, as you can see, we start to find a reduction in the loss. So this bass, this example, $450 secondhand, that's what we're going to start off with. Tuners, like we said, don't need upgrading. Pickup, £75. Bridge, if we're going to try and match it to that Pro, £29, bargain. Definitely need secondhand strings, another new set of strings. Wiring, if we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's compare them directly. Better pickups, needs better pots, so let's do that. And gig bag, you've probably got one. The guy that you bought it from probably has provided a gig bag of some sort. If it was shipped, it probably was shipped in a gig bag and then had a bag around it, a box around it, sorry. So that's it, that's kind of sorted. And as you can see there, I lost only £158. So overall, losing less money, getting a bass with more resale value. We've got the Fender brand as well, so you've got that kind of prestige. And in terms of features, it's a little bit nicer. It's probably going to feel a little bit nicer. It's going to be finished a little bit better than the Squires. So there we go. Overall, loss is less. And then taking it across to the Pro P, this is where I think it can go really badly wrong. So I don't think it needs any upgrades. I think maybe it doesn't sound quite the same as having that Damasio pickup. It has a particular dark, bassy, thick voice, which I love. I love that. I do love that pickup, gotta be honest. But I don't think it needs that. It doesn't need a pickup upgrade. The pickup in it is pretty good. The tuners are really high quality, top end Fender ones. The bridge is pretty much equivalent to the £29 one we've been looking at. It's a little bit different. It's kind of a hybrid between the bent bridge, but I really like the bridge on the American Pro. Strings are great. They're just standard Fender ones, but no problem. Don't need to tweak them out of the box. The pots and everything in those basses are really good, so no worries about that. The setup on an American Fender is pretty good out the box, to be honest. I think you can really do a good job with a bass set up straight from the factory, don't worry about it. And you're getting a case, so you're getting on a full case, which is worth probably £100 or so on its own. So if you wanted to, you could always sell that. I personally would probably keep it and then keep it for when you sell it. But is that going to add much to the resale value secondhand? Probably not. So if you don't want it, I would consider selling it secondhand. You can maybe look at taking £50 off it, £75 at the most, probably more like £50 off that price. But overall, buying that brand new at £1,600, you're going to make quite a lot of a loss. So losing £674 when you go to sell that secondhand. That 925 mark is kind of taken from this bass here. I think that's gone for a little bit higher than it typically should do. Maybe I've aimed a little bit low with 925, but somewhere around the 950 to 1,000 mark typically is where standard Fenders have been for a long time. Between 900, 800 for the American standard, and then with the Pro it's gone up a little bit to more around that £900 to £1,000 mark. But 925 I think is about right. I think that second hand is an estimate. So moving on, we've just got the Pro precision bass second hand, using the same numbers as we got for the resale before, so 925, and then a new set of strings. Definitely need some new strings. It's a second hand bass, you're going to want some new fresh strings on it, and that's going to take our total loss to £20. Because nothing on that bass needs upgrading, it doesn't need tweaking. So I think we can see there that in terms of the economics, the more you spend, the less you lose, but only if you're buying second hand. When you look at it, recapping this, brand new with all the upgrades on a CV60s to get it to kind of Pro standard, we're looking at £364 you would lose. Second hand, you're going to lose £270. Fender Player P, brand new, you're losing £312, so you're losing less than if you bought the Squire, which I think is important to note. And second hand, you're losing less than if you bought the second hand Squire, just because these basses don't need all the upgrades straight off the bat. And then with the Pro, brand new, that is where you're losing a lot of money, because there's a lot of money to be lost, because people just aren't willing to spend close to that kind of original price in order to buy it second hand. But buying those basses second hand is where the real value is to be found. If you can get those basses and stump up that money initially, typically you're going to lose very little money. So that's kind of my little run through of the prices and the numbers. There are some caveats to all of this. The fact that I've chosen Fender basses is particularly important. So with the Fender bass, you kind of know, and it's not really going to deviate from those kind of prices. So that USA Pro P bass might be sold for a little bit less, it might sell for a little bit more, but you know it's going to be in that kind of ballpark in the 900 to 1,000 range. And the reason for that is because it's a Fender precision bass. People are always going to want a Fender P, and it's a classic bass that sits in the market, and people will just want to buy it. They'll just go and buy one happily. Whereas if you've got something a little bit more odd, something that's not quite to everyone's taste, that isn't as standard in the industry, then those numbers start to vary a little bit. You might have purchased it for, say, £1,000, but someone might only be willing to pay £800 next time you go to sell it second hand because the demand isn't there. So sticking with a Fender bass is definitely a good way to make sure that your resale value sticks. That also includes custom shop basses. Typically, I think with a custom shop bass, if you buy a team built custom shop, you can spend, I negotiated to £2,400 for that one behind me, and I know that I will typically get roughly £1,900 to £2,000 for that bass whenever I go to sell it, because that is just the steady market that it happens to be when it comes to a Fender. If I was to buy something like a Yamaha TRB, which are basses that I really like and have had before, that really can vary. You can pay, say, £1,200 for one, and someone might be listing one at 1,600 because that's what they think it's worth, or someone might list one at 800, and it really is, there is more variance in there for things to be not quite as clear cut. So if you are really focused on this and worried about the profit and loss element of buying a bass, definitely consider sticking with Fenders. It's difficult for me to say to everybody that watches this channel, oh, just go and buy a top-end bass and pay the money for it because you won't lose any money down the road, because obviously not all of us have money straight away to stump up. But if you can do it, I think it's really worth it. And if you can buy second hand from a shop and finance in some way, you'll pay a little bit of a premium from buying it from a store rather than from someone else independently. But you can kind of balance it out and pay over time whilst also being able to get the most value when it comes to the resale. So by all means, don't think that I'm saying don't ever go and buy a Squire, or don't go and ever buy a bass that's any cheaper. But in terms of the actual numbers, I think you're always best off getting the highest end bass you can second hand, particularly with a Fender. So overall, my conclusions are buy second hand. So if you can buy second hand, I would do it. If you can find a good second hand example that you're happy with, if you don't mind a couple of dents or scratches or whatever, definitely go for it. Don't be afraid of a bass that's got cosmetic damage on the body. So long as the fretboard and the neck are in good condition, the electronics sound good, there's no issues with wiring or anything like that, it's definitely worth looking at the second hand market. And as I say, I've bought every bass that I own except one second hand. My second tip would be to not upgrade your basses. I don't think there is any value from upgrading your basses when it comes to retaining value. If you want to enjoy that bass and you want to change the sound and you don't care how much it costs you, then do it and don't worry about it. But if you are someone who is considering kind of wanting to keep value, or you trade your basses a lot, I wouldn't upgrade the bass and the parts on it. I would just keep the bass, see if you like it or dislike it, and then go and buy another bass. If you do want a bass that's upgraded, I would say to get one that's pre-upgraded and buy that second hand. There's really no value in the second-hand market for having an upgraded bass. No one really pays any more because it's upgraded. A stock bass will pretty much get the same money as an upgraded one. So I would keep that in mind, and if you want to buy a bass with upgrades, that's a great way to get a better bass, because undoubtedly an upgrade is going to make it better. It's a great way to get a bass without paying any extra for those upgrades. So if you're a player and you love gigging and you want certain features or want a bass that's even better than stock, definitely look for those second-hand options that are upgraded. My last tip would be that the best resale always comes from the upper end of the market. So if you can afford to go and spend more and get a better quality bass, overall you're going to lose less money. And that's really what I've kind of taken in consideration all the way through my bass purchasing experience, is to buy something that is more expensive at the outset, but that I then don't tweak and I can sell for the same money. Some of the basses I've had so long that I can sell them for more than I bought them for. Obviously you've got to include inflation in that, so maybe it's probably worth roughly the same amount as it was back then. But, you know, in terms of the actual numbers, it's worth more than when I bought that bass. And that's always going to happen as well. If you're buying things with prestige, Federers, Sadowskis, Ken Smiths, MTDs, even, you know, Fenders, probably biggest Fenders, value changes with age and time. So if you buy one now and you keep it for years and years and years, you could make loads of money on that potentially down the road. You never know. But buying a more expensive bass is the best way to keep your money safe and secure. It's not going to be the best way for you to necessarily spend your money and live a great life doing loads of different things, but you've always got that there, kept away, the value is there. And if you're buying a high-end bass, that value isn't going to just drift off. It's going to stay pretty much where you bought it if you're buying second hand. So that would be my final tip, is if you're going to buy an expensive bass, buy it used. There's only one of my basses that was bought new and was really expensive, and I've taken the biggest hit on that straight off the bat. The moment I left the showroom, left the store with that bass, was the moment that it lost most of its value, which is one of the reasons why I want to just keep it for a really long time and not really sell it on. And that would be my tip to anyone. If you're going to buy an expensive bass, try and buy it used, because that first buyer is the one who's really going to pay the price for buying that bass. So those are my thoughts on buying and selling basses. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously this is all kind of a little bit theoretical, but it's also typical of my experience as I've gone through buying and selling far too many basses. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight and maybe might make you consider it a little bit differently. Obviously it is big money and I don't want to by any means say, oh yeah, everyone should just go and spend that kind of money. I play bass and I make a living playing bass, so one of these basses I do, you know, if I do 5 gigs with an American Pro bass, even though 5 weddings or whatever, that's kind of it taken care of. A few sessions, you know, it makes up its money. If you're buying this for your own pleasure and to be at home, then maybe you don't want to be spending this kind of money, and you don't necessarily need those upgrades that you get from a Pro Series P bass. And of course there's also the element of, is it really worth it? Do you hear the difference? But I think economically, which is something that I consider quite strongly because I'm a bit sad like that, economically it's one of the things that I really do consider when buying a bass, is how much value can I retain and how can I not really lose any money when I am dealing in buying and selling basses. So that's it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you buy your basses and upgrade them, or do you prefer to buy the best bass you can and just leave it stock? If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and also to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this, more gear reviews and other bass related content. Hit that subscribe button and then hit that notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos and for when I go live. Don't forget also to follow me on Instagram, that will be linked below me right now. And I will see you all in the next video.